Welcome to the podcast dedicated to making you a faster cyclist, the Ask a Cycling Coach podcast presented by TrainerRoad. This is episode 347. Kind of wild to think we've done 347 of these. Pretty great. Today we have with us a great group of hosts. We have TrainerRoad and Cannondale's Amber Pierce.
Good morning.
We have Hand Up Plus, the Black Bibs Racing's Ivy Audrain.
Hi, John. Good job.
I nailed it. I'm done for the day. I'm out, retiring from podcasting. And we have Specialized and Ice Friction's Alex Wild. What's up, Alex?
Hey,
good to have you. You've been doing some big miles, big volume.
Been trying.
It's like you've been selected for a lifetime Grand Prix or something. So
yeah, something along those lines.
Today we're going to get into talking about training after illness. A lot of folks are training and coming back after illness. Disclaimer before we get into any of that: if you are dealing with COVID, talk to a doctor on coming back. This is not medical advice. That needs to be understood. We're going to talk about the training process coming back from that. We're not going to talk about how to treat your illness. So just want to make sure that's clear. None of us really feel like doctors. And even if we did feel like doctors, we aren't doctors. So we'll also talk about early season racing. We're going to talk about training camps and how to use those to be able to, dare we say, super boost your training and your fitness along the different time of the year. It's going to be a good one. We're also going to do some rapid fire stuff. But first, I want to ask a favor from all of us podcast listeners here. We want your feedback on how to improve the podcast. We do this every year. We have a survey that's right now. If you go to trainerroad.com/podcast, there will be a spot where you can submit your feedback through a survey. Right where you say submit, or right where you click to be able to submit a question, next to that will be a button in white and it will say share your feedback. So please click that and please go and share your feedback so then we can make this podcast better. Constant improvement is one of the principles that we believe in here at TrainerRoad. We don't have like a basic core values. We have very different ones perhaps than what people are used to, but constant improvement is one of them. And we always want to make this podcast better. So tell us the content that you like, tell us the content you don't like, and lots of other things. So then we can make this podcast the best one for all of you. Now, with that, Amber, I'm exhausted today. I started swimming yesterday. I did 2,600 meters for my first proper swim, and I did not drown. Strava said morning swim. I wanted to change it to drowning swim, but I didn't fully drown. But I'm exhausted because I had that. And then I had high endurance or N plus for 2 hours also yesterday. Pretty tiring. You got an hour and a half sleep with your little one last night.
Yeah, she's gone through a sleep regression. It's the opposite of fun.
Alex has been putting in big volume. He's probably exhausted.
Don't want to talk about sleep with you too. Sorry.
And because of Nate sharing our product roadmap, Ivy's also partially dead on the forum.
Thanks,
poor
Nate.
Ivy. Yeah.
I love you so much, man.
So the bar is low today for this podcast, everybody. I hope it's still going to be an enjoyable one for everyone.
Do our best.
Can we talk about this swimming thing really quick, Amber? I want to share my experiences of going into this triathlon training thing along the way. So partially all of you triathletes can laugh at me, a cyclist trying to go over to triathlon, which typically cyclists always make fun of triathletes. So I will be the punching bag. You get to giggle at my expense. But so Amber, we've talked about swimming a couple times before on the podcast. I don't dive when I'm in the water, so that's good. But I'm certainly, yeah, but I'm not very good at moving in a specific direction at any sort of rate of speed. And I also seem to be better at drinking water than swimming in it. So I went to a master's swim group that we have here in Reno because they would have a coach, and that coach would then give me direction on what to do. It's something that I pay for, and it's I can go 6 days of the week if I wanted to, but my plan is to go 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. It's super early. I get there at 5 a.m. and then we start swimming. So it's bright and early, but
welcome to swim life.
Yeah. Also super concerning while swimming and while everyone's swimming laps, I then noticed it was foggy basically in the place because there were so many people swimming. Yeah. And I was like, this is basically like gas, like chlorine fog that we're all just breathing in. How did Amber survive all of this? So, and then in addition to that, man, swimming is just so hard and I'll just say for me, but I bet other people probably can relate to this too. But it's so tough. It's a 25-yard pool. And Steve, the instructor, was like, all right, well, can you get to the end of the pool? And I was like, yeah. He's like, okay, then you can get into the water. And I got into the water and I swam to the other side, and I was just so out of breath. I mean, so out of breath. I tried to keep my head down, but then I just, my face was in water. So I breathed water. And so then I was like doing the full on like head way up and basically just dragging 45-degree angle through the water, which makes it even harder. Anyways, by the end of it, I felt like I got better because I was able to get to the other end and not be out of breath. And then I could have probably strung laps together, but I didn't. And this is the first thing I want to ask you. I was taking a break at the end of the pool and this might be overanalyzing, but I was taking a break and then going, what did I do well? What didn't I do well? And making sure I was fully caught up on breath. Would you think am I overanalyzing it? Should I just try to be stringing things together right now? Or should I just be focusing on the form stuff?
I think focusing on the form stuff is really important, because focusing on the form stuff will develop the musculature and the endurance that you need to do multiple laps at a time. And I think it's harder to focus on the form stuff when you're really distracted by not being able to get enough air. So I think you're actually doing the right thing by stopping and resetting and making sure that you've caught your breath. You're allowing your whole nervous system to be present for the learning process. Because if you are still out of breath and then you're starting that next lap, first of all, you're not going to be able to be as reflective about the previous lap and what you want to work on for the next one. And you're not going to be able to focus as much on what you want to do on that next lap in terms of applying what you learned from the previous one. So I think you're actually doing the right thing here. You're giving yourself the best opportunity to be in a learning mindset and for your body to really absorb not only the chlorine, but also the lessons that you're learning in the pool. I think it's a really great approach. And the form, the fitness, the strength that you're going to need to string together laps, it'll come. And you'll know when you're ready for that. Just like you could tell a difference between when you got in the pool and when you got out of the pool. You'll get to a point where you're like, oh, I don't need to stop as long before I feel like I'm caught up on my breath and I feel comfortable starting the next lap. And then eventually you'll get to a point where you're comfortable with the breathing enough that it'll be okay to be out of breath, because your body your nervous system isn't going to be wondering whether this is a life-threatening situation or not. And you'll feel that difference as you go. So I think you're doing a really great job just trusting yourself as you're going through this. Nice work.
Thank you. Yeah. So a couple things. First of all, I'm totally not symmetrical. I realize right now in my stroke, because I'm trying to breathe and I'm really trying to pay attention. And I like, part of me was like, no, don't get used to breathing on one side. You should breathe on both sides. But I figured, hey, why don't we just work on not choking first, and then we can worry about breathing on either side.
That's a good plan.
Yeah. So I'm definitely like asymmetrical in the sense that I'm giving myself a lot more time on one side, to be able to get the breath that I need and then be able to go back into the stroke. Is that a bad thing? Or do you think that that's also to be expected at this point?
I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. And I think a lot of open water swimmers choose to breathe only to one side, and they do swim more asymmetrically than swimmers who are maybe racing in a pool or competition pool. A lot of coaches will make a big deal about working on what they call alternate breathing, so that you're breathing from one side to the other. And that requires that you breathe every odd number of strokes. So every 3 strokes, every 5 strokes. You're not going to want to go every 5 or 7 at this point. Trust me.
Oh yeah. I tried that because I was like, well, breathing sucks and I just swallow water. So let's just not breathe. And that didn't work out very well.
Yeah. I think the number one thing is to get the breathing down, because once you get the breathing down, your body's not going to be in fight or flight and you can be in learning mode. And that's the most important thing. I would recommend experimenting with some alternate breathing though, because what you don't want to happen is that you are only ever comfortable breathing on one side. Because you just may end up in a situation where you end up having to breathe to the other side, and you don't want that to feel really disruptive. And I think it's also a good place to start just from a form standpoint, because technique in swimming is so important. It's better if you can maybe try to minimize embedding bad habits from the beginning. I'm not saying breathing to one side is a bad habit, but I think it is worth, when you're in the learning process, trying both sides and trying to feel at least reasonably comfortable on both sides. And then if you decide later that you feel faster by breathing to one side, then you're making the choice. You're not being forced into that as your default mode of swimming.
I feel like with open water swimming, being able to breathe on both sides would be really important too. Just waves or different things that are coming up. Like, I feel like it could be pretty important. So
yeah.
One thing Steve said too. So, us beginners, I think we all struggle with keeping our head low and keeping our chest low. Steve shared something that really helped me. He said, when you're standing on the ground, your center of mass is like your hips or your belly button. He said, your center of mass you should think of in the water as your lungs.
Yeah.
And he said, so if you drive those lungs down and everything up from there is going to be slightly angled down like that when you're going into that water, he said, that's going to keep your hips high and everything else. I got buoyancy shorts too to help with that. And those, they seem to help, but at this point, like I have no clue what's helping. I'm just, yeah.
Just call them what they are. They're water wings. It's all right.
How funny would that be? I show up, I'm just like, floaties on my limbs.
Put me in, coach.
Yeah.
Does it mean that this is how I imagined your training this whole time? I just kind of assumed.
No, it's fair. I'm that bad. Yeah, it's fair.
It's like that. I was like, that's the only way I'd make it to the end of the pool.
Yeah. But like Steve said, when you keep your head low like that, because I was like, so I've been told that, if I keep my chin kind of tucked and I go and breathe, that it'll work. But every time I do that, I just get a very large amount of water that I swallow. So it doesn't seem to work. And then he basically, like one of the things that he told me, he was like, well, he said, your head, when you keep it low enough, it kind of creates like a swell in front of your head, which creates like a kind of like a negative space, so to speak, behind that head. So then therefore you can breathe. And I was like, oh, okay. And I tried it and I was like, Steve, it's not working. He's like, well, you swim so slow, there's not much wake to be made. But he was very sweet about it. He was saying it in a nice way. So I've just learned that I kind of have to let my body rotate a little bit more than I thought I would have to. And that seems to be helping though, is just really allowing my body to rotate instead of thinking of myself in the water as like, just like a big flat wide boat that's plopped onto the water and needs to swim that way. Instead of thinking of myself almost like a log in the water that I can just rotate freely. And that's been really helpful. The other thing that he mentioned too was that I wasn't rotating my lower body, just my upper body. So my lower body was staying the same. And also I was way over kicking. And we could do a 2-hour podcast on just what I did wrong. And I could do about a 30-second podcast on what I did right. So, but hey, there was progress. So anyways, if this is interesting to people, let us know. I'll share more things that I learned and my misfortunes and misgivings and misadventures along the way. Tomorrow, I'm meeting with a run coach, a really good run coach here, and he's coming to Reno. So I'm going to do some run training because I feel like I'm a decent runner, but I have no clue in terms of form or anything else. So I might be really bad.
You and me both.
I can go fast.
In my experience, you're not. Like cyclists think they're good runners because we have big lungs and it's like, but we look like we're running from a serial killer or something. Yeah. I'm pretty sure.
Hands are like flying up in the air. Yeah. I ran one fast 5K, so it's dangerous enough for me to think that I can actually run, right? Like that's like the problem. That's a short enough race that I could probably just flail my way through it and kind of make out okay. So anyways, I'll be sharing all this stuff. Lots of questions on which Ironman I'm planning to do. Also about like which Ironman everyone's planning to do. So Ivy, which Ironman are you planning to do?
All of them. You know me, I'll be there.
Yeah, nobody else is doing this, just me. So that
tells you all you need to know.
Exactly. Yeah. And I'm not planning on doing an Ironman this year, not planning on doing a half this year. I don't even know if I'll race a triathlon this year. I'm going to train as a triathlete this year. I'm going to try to figure that out. I might race, might do like an Olympic or a sprint or an Xterra, but once races start to come around, I really, that's when my wife will be very pregnant, and it's when the baby will already be here. So I don't want to be focused on racing and feeling like that it has any pull against much higher priorities. So probably not doing any big ones this year.
How long is a swim in an Ironman?
It's 2.4 miles. Yeah, I did 1.4 miles yesterday. Granted, with a break each lap or every 25 yards. So that's saying, but I didn't think that I would ever be able to swim that much, and especially after the first lap. So pretty cool.
Sounds very long.
I would drown.
Yes,
I would just die.
Very long.
Like, do people like drown sometimes?
Yeah, it has happened. Yeah, but they usually have people with kayaks, paddle boards, or nearby like rafts or something else.
This is a high risk sport.
With the group. Yeah. They're going dangerous. With the group. I've heard this somewhere, and I could be totally wrong, but statistically, the swim is safer than the other disciplines. They've had like more accidents have occurred in the other ones. Just, we've all like, whether it's health issues cropping up late into an Ironman or something like that, or whether it's
accumulated fatigue on
the bike.
Yeah. Swim comes first. So
yeah, it's a good thing.
I mean, the first hour,
that would be bad. So, but yeah, they typically have people to help them there. So I've talked to plenty of you athletes have reached out and you've said like, yeah, I had a fantastic race. I held onto the boat for a little while, and they don't move when you hold onto the boat, but so yeah, that's there and that helps people out. But
no sticky bottles.
No sticky bottles in the water. Yeah.
What?
No. Yeah. Hold on and hit the throttle. That could work. Yeah.
There are the ankles of other swimmers.
Oh yeah, this is true. This is true. Yeah.
Don't die, John, when you go do your first.
Has anyone seen that old
actually
Cliff Bar commercial? That was my favorite.
No.
Where it was like, he was like talking about like, oh yeah, I'm just training for triathlon. It was these guys on paddle boards, like beating him with the giant Q-tips. He was like practicing the start because everybody just like swims on top of one another.
Punches and kicks and bloody
he was like,
broken
I like to train like I race.
Eyes. Yeah. That was wild, by the way. Like, so I was in the slow lane with elderly folks or people recovering from injuries, and I'm swimming with them. And they're still so much faster than me. But when they're in front of me, I'm in like a sea of bubbles. Mm-hmm. And it's like, it's kind of hard to see. And I was thinking in a lake, this would be so hard, like for spotting when you're surrounded by everybody. And it's just, you're in these bubbles or you can't see. And man, it would be.
Imagine
really
if your imagination's like mine and you just see like the ocean and you're like waiting for Jaws to come up and grab you.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah,
I used to swim with my head up as a kid in the ocean for that exact reason.
If I can't see it, it's not there. Anyways, it's a wild and new adventure for me, and it's definitely, if you want to see me suck at something, that's it for sure. I'm gonna ask Steve at some point to like use a GoPro to film me, just per Nate's request, because Nate really wants to see me suck at something. That was his specific request. So. Okay,
then you get that steep progression curve.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
The best part. If you can get through like the muddling of learning something new, you get like the quick progression. Yeah, I don't feel like you get that in cycling when you've been doing it for years. It's like little baby steps.
Yeah, that's the truth. Yeah, you get kind of like addicted to the process of improvement and putting in the time and everything else. But the reward part, that rapid reward, isn't quite there. So. I'm looking forward to that and hoping that exists in swimming. So far, reward is not rapid, but I assume it will show up at some point. So, okay, I want to talk about testing to kick this off, because one of the features that Nate talked about is one that you are working on, Amber.
Yes.
And we are, it's yet to be named. It's going to be going into early access sometime soon. Nate also mentioned that, like, go check it out in early access. It's not there yet. It will be sometime soon. But
it's in jail.
It's in jail. Ivy jail. Yeah. But so we might even just call it new FTP feature, because it's not named yet. But basically what it does is, when you have a ramp test, you can either select this option to let AI calculate what your FTP is and basically go through and figure out what that is, or you can take the ramp test, or take the 20-minute test, or take the 8-minute test, whatever testing format you want. So we talked about that. And then on the forum, there was kind of a discussion. It's the same discussion that happens around testing all the time, which is like, I don't like this testing format, or I don't like this one because one person says it's not my true hour power. Or another person says, well, it's not measured with lactate testing in a lab, therefore all of it's invalid. And then another person says, well, I get better numbers when I do the 8-minute test, or I get better numbers when I do the ramp test. So that one's valid and all the rest are not valid. And it's a really messy bit of discussion that exists.
I love how the validity is always tied to which gives the highest number.
Yeah. Interestingly, when we released the ramp test, there were very few complaints by people saying it just gives me too high of an FTP. Or people that take the 20-minute test and or the 8-minute test, we never hear from people going, hey, support, I'm reaching out to let you know that this just gave me my ego too much of a padding and far too much of a high FTP. I want you to make it lower. Nobody ever says that. But I want to talk about hosting or testing first of all, and ask the host, honestly, in here, who enjoys FTP testing in whatever format you do it? Who enjoys it?
This should come as no surprise to anybody.
Alex is raising his hand for podcast people. Yeah. And Ivy, you're raising your hand. Ivy, you enjoy it?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. I don't know what's wrong with me.
Explain yourself, please.
I don't know. I think I had to really change my perspective of just longer efforts in order to do them and enjoy them and like successfully train.
Mm-hmm.
So I started liking those longer tests or longer efforts, and now I like testing. I don't know. Sorry.
So do you dread test day? Or do you look forward to test day?
I get so excited.
I'm impressed. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I don't feel that way. Amber, you don't feel that way either. You raise your hand.
It really depends. Like, I don't mind testing. I don't particularly enjoy it. It's not something that I necessarily dread. What I really did not like, and I find just not fun, is doing lab testing. Lab testing is not fun.
Yeah. I'll agree with that for sure.
Yeah. So like doing an actual lactate test in a lab where they're testing your blood and they're actually, doing the thing. It's really not fun.
Did you have a mask on too when you did those ones? That's the worst.
For the VO2 max testing, yeah, and that's awful.
Sometimes when they do a lactate test, they also like use masks for one reason or another because they want to measure gas exchange at the same time. And it's like, how am I supposed to perform at my best when I am choking and I cannot breathe and it's so dry and like, it's just so hard. It's really tough for sure. Yeah. Alex, why do you like testing? I mean, I have a lot of ideas as to why for you.
Testing normally happens in the off season where I feel like it's rare for, I guess, my coach to let me off the leash and actually let me go full gas. So I think there's enjoyment in just like sending it, I guess, instead of like a controlled, like, let's just pedal at this wattage for these many minutes and then change the wattage in minutes and then change it again. I've learned to love just kind of the process, which sounds very off brand for me, but I've started doing testing without power on the screen. I just have a big timer for whatever distance or time, whatever time we need to do. And so I think it's a fun mental experiment. I go into testing with the motto of I can suffer more than that. So every time I feel like I'm at my limit, it's like, nah, I can suffer more than that. So it's kind of just a chance for me to send it in the off season.
It's almost like it's a break. I think a lot of people, when they see a test, they experience what you experience when you train, in the sense that it's like measured. They're going to try to hit a target or hold to something like that. And it's for these exact minutes and it feels a bit more structured, but for you, it's like a break from that almost.
Yeah. And I feel like people get too tied up in small amounts. Like my threshold, I think, is set to 385 right now from testing. And let's say it was supposed to be 395, but the ranges on all my intervals are 10 watts anyway. And my OCD doesn't let me hit anything but the top of the range. So I feel like there's a piece of my coach knows me as well. So he might set my FTP like artificially low, knowing that my personality will hit the top of the range plus 5 watts. So that
Alex,
in the
you're
end,
a complicated beast.
so then we actually train to what we're supposed to at the end of the day. So
yeah,
I don't know.
Well, that brings up a good point of FTP. with adaptive training and everything else we talked about, how it makes up for those sort of adjustments, how there's wiggle room within that, and
it's not like an exact science, right? Like if you did 10 watts more or 10 watts less, it's not going to break your training. So I think it's just a matter of putting out what you have on the day. I've years ago fallen into the trap of like trying to like peak performance for test day, right? And I think people fall into that, and it's like now it's like whatever I have on the day, I have to train to that anyway, so it's fine. So I've kind of let go of expectation and like numbers in my head, and just seen it as an opportunity to go hard when I'm not normally allowed to.
So we are not representative of reality, this group. We are 50-50, and that is so far from what we see in the data. People do not like testing. And it's understandable. There's a whole lot of stress that comes with testing. Also kind of like what you hinted at too, Alex, in the sense that like you can come in with a whole lot of stress, and stress is additional, like training, like I'm talking training stress. And then you have,
and it's not all
training
sunshine
stress
and
from the
rainbows.
test.
I definitely come in with like race day nerves on test day. Like don't get me wrong. I'm not like, haha, yeah, everything's great. Like I care. I've learned to let go of the results driven day and more of just like what am I capable of kind of day, and approach it with an amber mindset of just like, I'm excited. Let's see what's going to happen.
And that brings up, I think the other part though, is getting the most out of yourself on a test, or an accurate representation of your abilities. It doesn't have to be your peak performance ever, but an accurate representation, that's hard. Like, and it's hard for a bunch of different reasons. Whether that's the stress coming into the test and you have testing anxiety and that affects you of being able to do it. I think it's from doing the live ramp tests on the internet in front of thousands of people, but I have some serious test anxiety with the ramp test. We do not get along anymore. It's hard. And even like any testing format, it's just tough for me. Now that said, I think that represents a whole lot of people in the sense that they feel like with any testing format or a specific testing format or testing in general, it's hard to get an accurate representation of what you feel like you're actually able to do. And that's another tough part with testing is, it's like, it's a single moment, and it's like, okay, that single moment represents your abilities as an athlete. And that's really tough. We've all had really bad races, and every race doesn't represent us as an athlete. Like bad days happen, and that's just how it goes. But it would be a shame to just set everything so rigidly upon that one moment. So this is all leaning toward why we created this feature. But Amber, let's talk a little bit more about FTP testing in general, why FTP testing exists and why we use FTP, all that stuff. Do you want to kick us off on that?
Yeah, sure. So just a quick overview. I won't do a deep dive on this. This will be a very shallow dive. We'll just stick our toe in here. Lactate threshold. So functional threshold power is what FTP stands for. And that is related to your lactate threshold, which in really quick, simple terms this is sort of where your energy demand equals your energy supply. So this is sort of where you can land at a steady state power output. Now, when you're talking about power, that brings in some cycling efficiency stuff. So it's not exactly the same thing as your lactate threshold, but really what this is it's a level of effort where roughly energy demand equals energy supply. And then when we look at training, we talk about different training zones, of course, and each of those zones is going to stress your body in a different way. So the specific type of stress is going to elicit a specific type of adaptation. So how you're stressing your body metabolically at a given energy level is going to determine how your body is going to adapt to that stressor. And really when we're trying to get those adaptations. So when we're looking at the different ways that we can stress the body metabolically, we're looking at those kind of relative to that lactate threshold, or when we're talking in terms of power, that functional threshold power. So this is just a very high level. We could go really deep in the weeds on this. We're not going to do that right now. So I know a lot of you out there listening have a very deep understanding of this, and this is going to seem very, very high level and superficial. But I think it's important that we just kind of touch on that to frame this conversation. So testing and figuring out what your FTP is helps you benchmark your training. And I was just thinking as you were talking, Jonathan, early on in my career, I really felt like numbers were somewhat determinant, right? So if I had a VO2 max test, it was going to kind of say what my potential as an athlete was. Like, this is what I'm capable of doing. And it kind of lays out this roadmap of this is as good as you can ever be. And that's not actually true. And the way that we actually use numbers when racing professionally is really different. So the most common way that I saw, at least for me in a lot of the athletes that I was working with, FTP testing was mostly done coming back in the off season and the early season of training to make sure that we didn't train too hard, too fast. It was basically to set kind of a limit to make sure that we weren't doing too much too early in the season. It wasn't about, oh, how good are you? And it's nice to see that progress for the season as well. But it was really just about kind of capping and making sure we weren't doing too much too fast. And once I realized that was the primary utility of it, it took a lot of the anxiety out of it for me. So these numbers are useful tools for training, but they're not your fate. They're not determinant, and they're not going to say how good of an athlete you are or aren't or can be. It's none of those things. It's a very useful training metric that you can apply to help calibrate the intensity in your power targets in your training.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely. So it's, and I think that's probably the healthiest perspective to have on it. It's not a determination of your potential as an athlete or anything else like that. And so when we look at data and we look at our athletes and athletic performances and everything else, we also don't look at it through the lens of quantifying everybody just by their FTP, and that's where they're at. In fact, we see in terms of improvement that it's much more about, and we sound like a broken record, but consistency. And what I mean by consistency is how regular you are with your training, comparing your long-term average to that same measurement, but on a much shorter time scale, and seeing if you maintain that over a good length of time. Those are the athletes that see the best improvements. The chat's blowing up, by the way. People are sharing their thoughts on testing, and it's fantastic. Good to have you all on YouTube, and you can join us Thursdays at 8 a.m. Pacific. So getting back to lactate threshold, like basically your body produces lactate, it hits an inflection point where it's no longer able to reprocess that lactate. It's super cool. It's like a car that somehow feeds off its own exhaust, and that exhaust is like actually like super fuel. It's super cool. But then it gets to a point where it starts to produce a lot more, and it can't reprocess it. So it starts to increase its presence at an exponential rate. And that's where our lactate threshold typically is. But the tricky part is if you look, so that can be measured with, like you mentioned, blood lactate tests. They either prick your finger or they prick your ear while you're doing these really hard efforts. It's not very pleasant. That's for darn sure. So it's like, do a RAM test or do a 20-minute test. And then while you're doing that, we're just going to poke you and make you bleed every once in a while, but don't stop, hold that power target. So,
and then, by the way, stop and talk to us about how hard it feels like you're going right now.
Yeah. Give us an RPE rating as you're going through this too, please. Yeah. And also probably hop on an erg bike that feels super weird and unfamiliar and not like pedaling any other bicycle in the world. So anyways, but yeah, that's that. So there's that, and you can measure that. But then this whole concept of kind of like this whole concept switch, and stop me if you want to talk about some other stuff on lactate before I get into field testing, Amber.
No, I think that's a great jumping off point.
Yeah, because that's where we can measure it. But then it's so inaccessible for a lot of us to be like, yeah, I'm just going to head to the lab today and pay a bunch of money and be able to get this measurement. It is. Yeah. It's very expensive. And it's also, it's just difficult because most places, I mean, different towns or cities where you're in, who knows if they even have this sort of equipment, metabolic carts and everything else. So anyways, it's really inaccessible. So field testing is an approximation or a way to be able to do something outside of a laboratory environment and to be able to get a close indication of where that threshold might be. Now, there's this tie that like your lactate threshold should be your hour power. And it's something that has been taken as gospel for some, like that is absolutely the truth. And you have to be able to hold that power for 60 minutes. And if you can't, it is not your FTP. It is lower than that. But this gets into the complexities of testing in and of itself. And also, I mean, being able to hold your actual threshold power for an hour is not just simply like, well, I just need to spin the pedals for that long. It's extremely difficult to do. That's why the hour record is never just a cut and dry thing. Alex Dowsett, Bradley Wiggins, and Jens Vogt I can think of. And geez, I mean, we have other hour record attempts. All of them say, I should be able to do this, but they have no clue if they'll actually be able to do it, because turns out we're not just robots. It's hard to be able to put out that power for an hour. It's really difficult.
Especially when you're crunched up into a tiny little ball.
Yeah, exactly.
And your chin's on top of your knees.
Yeah. So, but it's hard for all of us. I mean, I'm sure, Alex, you've, do you go out and do 1 hour, 60 minutes and
that's
hold
actually
your
FTP? My testing protocol. Yeah. I just go right as far as I can for an hour, and that's my FTP.
That's not true. But that is, if anything,
I was like, I'm like, I don't know.
But it could be with Alex, right? Yeah. You never know with Alex.
Underwent another firmware update, and that's what he does now.
I just
plug myself
in. Yeah. So Alex doesn't even do that. There are very few people that do, but that doesn't mean that that's a bad idea if that's what you want to do. If that's what you want to do and that's what you feel like gives you good training, that's the goal, because that's the actual goal of all of this in terms of FTP. There's your lactate threshold, but then your FTP, which is basically your representation of your threshold in terms of power. So an approximation of, okay, what's your power like when you're at that lactate steady state before you hit that inflection point, right?
And if you find a climb that goes for an hour, please tell me where it is. I'd like to find it too.
Hawaii, Alex. We've talked about this.
I know. I'm excited.
Yeah.
There've got to be a couple in like Malibu Canyons,
Arizona too, for
LA
sure.
Area. Yeah.
Oh yeah, Lemon probably.
Oh yeah, well, Lemon's a whole lot longer than an hour for some of us, Alex. So
I don't even know what the KOM is, to be
honest. But anyways, the whole point with this, with field testing and everything else, is to get an approximation in terms of power of what that is. It's an estimate. It's never like a full on, like this is exactly what it is. Those estimates could be spot on. They could be close. They could be far off. But that's the whole point of field testing, is to be able to give us this experience of being able to have a training benchmark, like Amber said, to be able to train ourselves in strategic and specific ways, but to do it without the inconvenience, cost, and inaccessibility that exists with lab testing. So that's the goal. Now, there's a lot of different ways that you can do this field testing too, like tons of them. There's so many different forms of ramp tests. There's people that swear by a 12-minute test or a 20-minute test or a 2x8 minute test or a 30 or a 45 or a 60, and different exhaustion protocols prior to those efforts to be able to exhaust anaerobic stores. There's tons of different ones. If you're not satisfied with one sort of testing protocol, I promise you there's another one you can try. They just exist all over the place, but all of them have the same goal. Their goal is not necessarily to define your lactate steady state with perfection. Their goal is to give you an accurate training benchmark. And that's really, that point is controversial because a lot of people say, then why is it even called FTP? Then why is it tied to that? And there's that disagreement that exists. But from a coaching perspective, the goal is to give you good training. That's the goal. So this is where a lot of expectations probably have to shift in terms of what testing actually is and what testing actually delivers. Do you agree with that, Amber? Have any disagreements? Yeah.
No, definitely. I think some of the confusion arises when we look at professional riders, for example. We'll talk about their numbers a lot, and in the professional ranks, some performance directors, when they're looking at recruiting athletes, they'll be looking at those numbers as some indicators, but they're, again, even those folks are not looking at those numbers as absolute, like, okay, this athlete, has so much potential. The potential is always what remains to be seen. Always. Your numbers are never your fate. So I think what ends up happening is, in articles that we read about professional riders or quotes that we hear from these performance directors, there's an attitude of, yeah, we're looking at these numbers as a way to evaluate potential athletes for recruiting purposes. And that ends up getting really conflated, because when we're talking about those of us who are, and I count myself among those of us who are now training to feel good in life or for a weekend crit or for a personal goal event, FTP has a really different function. We're not trying out for a pro team. And it's not something, and even in those cases, again, it's not the thing that's going to benchmark what your potential as an athlete is. For us, it really is about making sure that your training is appropriate and that your power targets are appropriate and that you're progressing those power targets appropriately. So you're not just aiming for the same power target. If your fitness has gotten better, you want to keep progressing. And that's really the focus of it and the primary purpose of it. And I think that people get confused because we do hear about these same numbers being used for different contexts, but it's not, you have to break it down to how does this really apply for you in your own life? And when that is the case, it's usually about benchmarking for appropriate training targets.
And so with that goal being understood, it still doesn't change the fact that sometimes it's hard to get a good result in a field test.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like the other day, I'll share a personal one here for all of you. And this is me airing my own dirty laundry for everybody here. But like I did a ramp test a handful of weeks ago and I got 268. And the prior day, which was lower than I expected. And the prior day, the day before that, I was riding at sweet spot comfortably with my heart rate nice and low and chatting even with a friend while we were going up. And I did 290 for 45 minutes, right? So same elevation, same everything else. And I was comfortable and easy. Sometimes testing isn't going to capture that. And it could be testing anxiety. It could be nutrition. It could be stress from other factors in your life. It could be that you're training a ton. And as a result, you're just tired and fatigued and you're not able to get it out.
It'd be different doing 290 for 45 minutes the day before a test.
What's that? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But once again, it was relatively easy. But there's so many different things that could cause this for you to not get a good result. And that's one of the reasons why we created the ramp test, because if you're talking about a long steady state test, the failure rate I'll define failure rate in this case, the hit rate of the test in terms of getting a good training benchmark for people, the longer and more sustained interval it is, the more difficult it is for people to hit. Like sustaining power and holding it steady for a whole 20-minute effort is really hard for average people. They're probably super experienced people listening to this and being like, that's easy. Well, not for everybody. You're not everybody. It's really difficult for a lot of folks. And 2x8, same thing. The ramp test might be really hard for people for other reasons, but we created the ramp test to try to increase that hit rate to give people better training. And the way that we measured that was subsequent workouts. It wasn't, is this person happy with their FTP? Because if that was the case, we'd have an algorithm that just tells you your FTP is 400 plus all the time, right? But in this case, we'd look at subsequent workouts. Yeah, sure. Look at subsequent workouts and see what the success rate of those workouts was. If people were able to complete challenging workouts, and we did this in testing and gave them specific workouts that we knew would test those constraints, and we tested this thousands of times, and we were looking at, okay, the athletes are getting better quality training now. And it's not too low, it's not too high. They're right in the sweet spot. So that was why we designed the ramp test to increase that. But constant improvement, we still wanted to make better on that even more. So we have this whole idea of, instead of just taking a single snapshot in time where tons of variables could affect it, we want to go way deeper than that. Right, Amber? And that's kind of the whole goal behind the product that you've been building with your team.
Right. And I think anybody who's listening, who's done testing of any kind, especially if you've done repeated testing over time, you've probably experienced good test days and bad test days. And that's the thing with testing, is there's pros and cons to every method of testing out there in terms of field testing. You can control for a lot more factors if you're testing indoors. Weather is a really big one. Traffic is another one. Flat tires can happen. There's a lot of things that you really can't control when you're field testing outside. So you can control some more of those factors indoors. But even then, there are other things that are going on, like life stress. And it makes having a truly repeatable protocol very, very difficult. And some people are really good about this. You know, they're eating the same things, they're getting the same amount of sleep the night before. But for most of us in life, it is really hard to make things that repeatable.
Yeah, how repeatable is your sleep these days, Amber?
Yeah, there's just zero predictability in terms of the sleep right now. Zero.
It's like going to Vegas to the craps table every night. Who knows? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Past sleep is no predictor of future sleep right now.
Indeed.
So being able to control for more factors is really, really helpful. But it's really hard to do. And so what we're doing is, instead of taking that snapshot in time, we're considering a lot more factors, and we're kind of looking at, instead of a snapshot, you could think of it as looking at as a video clip. And we're looking at a lot of different factors and taking those into account so that we can, so for example, we could say, you know, if you were going to ramp test and you had a really bad day on a ramp test, ours would be able to look at some of your performance and a few other factors and say, actually, you know what? We think you can be here. And the goal of this feature is to benchmark you in a way that you can successfully complete productive workouts. That's the goal. We want you to be able to update your FTP and get really good training immediately after that. So if your FTP is too high or too low because you had a good or a bad test day, that can really impact your training. And that's so much, even if you have great bragging rights because you had a huge number or a really big increase and it feels really good, it's not going to feel as good when you're really struggling or possibly not able to complete productive workouts after that. That is counterproductive, even if you have the bragging rights. What we are after is really solid, successful training and consistency. And that's what we're really hoping to deliver with this feature.
And how we'll be validating this is, once again, looking at subsequent workouts. And then there's a really big thing to keep in mind. There's still wiggle room because of adaptive training, right? So we'll be looking at the adaptations that are made thereafter as well to see if things need adjustment for specific athletes or things need adjustment overall. But if it's not exactly what the number is that totally aligns with your maximal lactate steady state, whatever it may be, then it's going to make adjustments with adaptive training so that you're still getting those productive workouts that you need to be able to move forward. So it's really just, once again, taking steps toward that. Now, a really big, important point to make with all this, and this is awesome. I'm sure a lot of people are excited about not having to test and having this option, but we're not taking testing away either. If you want to test, you can still do it. You can do the ramp test. You can do the 20-minute test. You can do the 2x8. You could ride for 60 minutes and then record whatever that is and manually update your FTP. You can do all that stuff. Whatever you want to do, it's still there. This is just an option for you. So you'll basically be able to accept it or not. And a good way for you to look at how to validate this is, how do those workouts feel afterward? And once again, I'd say give it a week or two of going through workouts, because adaptive training over that time frame will be making the adjustments necessary to get you in productive zones. But that's how it works. So hopefully that explains it a bit. That explains hopefully the goal of FTP testing in terms of us athletes here that are listening to this. You know, average folks, we're not trying to put it and be drafted by really high profile teams, unless you're Alex, I don't know, but even Alex has a job and he's got his own team. So he's probably not interested in that. But the point is, it's about getting you better training. And that's what the whole goal is. So hopefully this is a good refresher on on FTP and how it relates to lactate threshold testing, and then why this new feature exists to try to make the whole thing a whole lot easier for you and give you better training. Okay, let's get into the next little bit and on early season races, setting expectations for those races, and then racing in the base phase. I want to go over all three of those things because, Ivy, your season is in the fall and into the winter because cyclocross is your main focus. So can you kick us off on this in terms of, but you've also raced pro road seasons, mountain bike seasons, you've done tons of different stuff. So you've had this chance to be able to pick early season races and do that.
Yeah.
What's the point of early season racing in your mind?
Well, now I do not feel like there is a point for me. I've made a lot of mistakes and done early season races in the base phase. And it was always so stressful on a road team as well, when a lot of our rosters were determined and based upon really early season team camps and early season training races. Where it was, this is a training race. Don't worry. No, it's not. You are picking our rosters. Yeah. So that was so stressful. But now for me, I feel like racing in the base season does something to me psychologically in a negative way that could outweigh any of those performance benefits or gains that I could make. So what I will do in later base phases, or in base season, is do fast group race rides, where I can still get some of those race intensity efforts if I feel like it, or I can just surf in and not feel any of that race pressure, and then not contemplate my entire self-worth and involvement in the sport, and if I should continue on because I had such a bad performance in base season, which I know I should not put any weight into, but we're
so hard
athletes,
not to.
you have to. So
yeah,
that's my new protocol is I do not register for races in my base season.
We're getting a lot of questions from athletes about like racing in the base season. It's normal because lots of you listen to this are in the base season, and then there's these races that pop up. So Ivy's perspective is one. Does anybody else have a different perspective to Ivy's that they want to share? I have one for sure, but does anybody else view early season races differently?
I use them as, I guess, everything besides racing. Like the racing is kind of the outcome, but like this year with Lifetime Series, the biggest change for me is racing gravel. So I found some local Grasshopper Series races that are gravel races, but kind of just show up with what I got and race. But for me, it's like get used to the gravel bike, like race a gravel race and kind of learn maybe things that seem obvious to most gravel racers, but I haven't learned yet. So that by the time I get to like Tusher or, Bentonville at the end of the year, that I feel confident racing a gravel bike. So for me, it's just kind of a fun way to get used to the new bike and new discipline.
Yeah. Amber, how about you? I mean, you probably have what Ivy said, which was like these early season races in air quotes that are actually very much slotting in for the team roster, but
tryouts.
Yeah. Were there any other things that you looked to gain from an early season race?
Yeah. And I think hearing Ivy's answer and Alex's answer highlights probably the crux of the issue is managing expectations. So some people are better at this than others. And I don't say that like, Alex, you're really good at this, and Ivy, you're terrible. It is genuinely hard. And this is something to know about yourself. And I think, Ivy, you're so wise about this, because if this is, if you know that you'll come away from an early season race with a hit to your confidence in a way that's going to be hard to come back from, it's smart to not do that to yourself. I mean, especially when you could get, racing usually takes away from training, right? Because you're going to have a couple days of resting or travel going into it. You're going to have to recover after it. So if the trade-off is, hey, I'm going to go do this race and possibly take a hit to my confidence and miss out on a few days of training, that's maybe not a great trade-off. But for somebody like Alex, who's like, you know what, I can get in there and, I'm on a learning curve with gravel, and this is going to be part of my training leading up to an A race later in the season. This is actually going to be more worth my while. And that trade-off from what I might miss out on training is going to be a good thing. So that's really, I think, what everybody has to weigh for themselves. So I think if you are going to do early season racing, number one, you have to be really honest with yourself about how well you're able to manage your expectations on it. Will you be able to go into this and completely let go of the result, like really, truly let go of the result and not internalize that as some kind of self-doubt? And if you think you can do that, then I think early season races can be really valuable in terms of working on process goals. So if you're somebody who, for example, is new to racing and you want to race on the road, I'll speak to that because that's my area of expertise. There's a lot that you can work on in an early season training race. Positioning is a huge one, and working on drafting and trying to use as little energy in the field as possible. See how long you can stay in the group without ever touching the wind. Playing little games like that with yourself can be really, really helpful. That doesn't work well when you're on a pro team and they're looking at your results to see whether or not they're going to select you for the next race. But if you're racing on your own and you're building out a season for yourself, this is a great exercise to do, because there are no expectations on you. And if you can go in with that idea of, hey, there's these specific skills that I want to work on that I can't work on in training by myself, then this is what I want to get out of it. And I'm going to feel good about that regardless of the outcome. Then there's some really, really great, really, really great gains to be made with early season racing.
Yeah. I struggle, Ivy, similarly. I bet most people probably do. And it's how you handle that is in one. And I really admire your approach with it. Just being like, hey, I know that it's too risky for me, so I don't do it. And I take a different approach. What I've found, and this probably will evolve and change over time. I don't know if you were always that way, Ivy. Like, I'm sure it's evolved for you over time, right? And for me, recently, I've kind of forced myself into doing early season races because it's not natural for me. I want to be like, store it all up and then one big day. That's like how I naturally just want to do it. But I've found that I race a whole lot better when I'm able to liberate myself from expectations. And that's even on my biggest days. I do better in those situations. And one thing about early season racing is it kind of forces me into that, because I've now gotten to the point where I won't beat myself up over it and I won't hold myself to that. So it kind of just forces the whole thing to happen in a positive way. So I do these races and I know like, okay, I'm going to get smashed. So that's okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go out here and I'm going to learn and get familiar with racing again, kind of like what Alex said, which is what Ivy accomplishes with her group rides too. Which if you're fortunate to have group rides around you like that, I know Ivy, she does the short commute from Montana to Sacramento to do those. But so like, which is like a third of the way across our country, by the way, if you aren't from here. So, but if you have something like that close to you, then it's awesome just to be able to get back into it, because there is something. And even like what Alex is saying, Alex is used to racing mountain bikes, but gravel is a bit different. Like the way the races unfold is different. The bike is different. The terrain is different, but also just the dynamics. So I think they can be really helpful. They can absolutely be damaging too, if you end up letting them define your abilities and set your expectations moving forward. But I do encourage people to give it a shot. And one thing to keep in mind is a lot of people are asking the question, should I race in the base phase? And it's really centered around fitness is the question, not setting expectations or even talking about, periodization or anything like that, but rather fitness. Like, are these hard race efforts going to somehow hurt my base training? And one thing I would say to that is that if it makes your subsequent workouts not possible, then yes, it's hurting your training. But in most cases, it probably isn't going to be like that unless you're doing huge, big, hard events. If they're something that's shorter and something that's a bit more approachable, probably not. But that's kind of the beauty of it coming in with half-baked fitness, right, Amber? It's like, you get to, because boy, that's when you learn. You've mentioned this with your stint over in your entire career over in Europe. But when you first went over there, how you were like, wow, I feel like I don't know how to race my bike. This is an entirely different set of like rules that we're playing on in terms of how to move efficiently through a pack. But when you don't have the fitness, or you feel one other way or in another way, you're handicapped, boy, that's when you learn how to race your bike.
Yeah. Like, it can be really valuable. It's tough. It can be really valuable to go into a race really tired and know that. And again, adjust your expectations. But what that does is it forces you to be extra efficient, because when you have a ton of fitness, you have a lot more room to make mistakes. And you can actually end up creating some bad habits as a result. But if you race pretty consistently when you're tired, you don't have room to make those mistakes. And you have to get really, really ruthlessly efficient about when and how you use your energy in the race. And that can be really helpful in terms of training your racing tactics and your race intuition. That said, going back to what you mentioned just a little bit ago, how that can possibly be detrimental to a training plan. And I think the two big factors are travel and recovery. So if you have to spend a lot of time traveling to a race and that's going to take away from your training, that's something to consider. And then, is the race long enough or intense enough that it's going to require extra time, extra days of recovery where you could be completing part of a structured training plan? So if the race fits into your training in the sense that maybe it's nearby, you don't have a really long commute to it, you feel like you can manage those expectations and you can be disciplined about how hard you go in that race so that you're not blowing up your entire next week of training, then it can be really beneficial. But that's a lot of ifs. So you have to be really honest with yourself about what you would be getting out of it and what those trade-offs may be for your training.
Assuming that criteria is in place, Alex, let's have you assume the position of a cross-country mountain biker. That's a common listener to this podcast, and we'll assume a handful of different scenarios.
I'll try my best.
Yeah. Yeah, it's totally foreign for you. What would you look for in early season races? Like advising a typical cross-country racer, what sort of races would you be encouraging them to look to do?
When I used to do early season races, it was just local ones. Like Amber said, a lot of the time, the travel piece and all that can take away from training. So if you can find one that you can sleep at home and drive an hour or two, those are my favorite. They're also a really good vibe. Like I really enjoy those local races and seeing the community. So I think that can help alleviate some of that like anxiety. It's just like intervals with friends, so to speak. For me in XC, it was a lot about like testing tires and setup. So like use it as an opportunity to like, okay, I'm going to set my rear suspension and front suspension at this. I'm going to set my tire pressure at this. And I'm going to try my dropper post in a race or whatever it is like that you're trying to test. And then I go into it normally, I think in the TrainerRoad setup, it's like a B race. Like there is a little bit of rest and it kind of just takes the place of like an interval day in my schedule. And with that, I know like the same way I approach intervals is just like, I'm going to give my full effort and the result will kind of come after that. And I'm more focused on those equipment pieces. Like, how did the tires feel? Did I feel good on the descents? Like, was my positioning good? Did I hit my pedal off the start? What could I have done better next time? But without the pressure of like it being this big event. And for me, the goal is to kind of get those like quote unquote stupid mistakes out of the way. And then also dial in any new equipment or anything that I've changed year to year.
Yeah. And if you're a mountain biker and you have road events by you, I consider circuit races or crits, if you have such liberty to choose, rather than big, long road races. Because I find that circuit races in particular are great for mountain bikers. Crits can be good, but many times the most efficient rider wins a crit. So it's a really different fitness profile than mountain biking, like very, very different. So you could learn something about that, and you can learn pack dynamics, which is really helpful on mountain bikes, just to, the best mountain bikers keep that present when they're racing. They aren't just going out and riding solo the whole time. So that's what I'd recommend for mountain bikers on the road. What about on the road side? Ivy, is there, would there be specific sort of events or anything else that you would encourage a road racer to target, whether it be like time trials, road races, circuit races, crits, or maybe a different discipline like gravel? I don't know. What would you recommend for a road racer trying to find early season races?
That's a good question. I think it depends upon what kind of rider you are, right? So if you race a lot of crits in the summer and that's the kind of rider you are, and you don't have to dig into some deep well of peak fitness to get out of the saddle a few times, and you feel like it would be a good refresher in your base season to do a circuit race or a crit, do it. If you're like a climber or a stage race person and you're just starting your base season and there's a local crit, maybe
maybe not ideal.
Yeah. And while I say that I normally don't race in the base season anymore, that's subject to change, right? Like there are more a broader variation of races that we can do that are available to us now that weren't before, like gravel racing. And I've sworn up and down that I will never do a gravel race, but people change, things can change. That would be
a great short circuit gravel.
What's that?
I thought you raced short circuit gravel.
Short circuit.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Wait, I
did. Track lacrosse is the actual name here. But Ivy, does that mean you're going to do a grasshopper?
When is it?
You're going to be in Sacramento. There are gravel races that happen in NorCal early season.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
right. Where Alex will be. Sorry, I thought you were hinting at that. I don't want to. I'm not putting you on the spot. No,
please don't come beat me, Ivy.
Well, if I'm in my base season and I feel like it's a discipline that's enough far out of reach for me that I won't have any sort of performance expectations, there's not a lot of travel to it, something like that, I would incorporate into my base season, maybe, because I wouldn't look at that as a race. It would just be an opportunity to have supported extended base / tempo miles with friends.
Yeah,
that's what Jen does actually. For her like ultras, like she'll have her 100K or 100 miler in the year, but like for her 50-mile training days, she'll find a race, but just because it has all the aid stations. So it's like logistically easier for her to run 50 miles with somebody else taking care of the snacks. So I thought that was pretty smart.
That's outsource brilliant. The snacks.
Yeah, exactly.
The snacks.
Let the snacks lead.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm personally of the opinion that it's not like there's a time that it's too early to race in your season, as long as the things that we've talked about with managing expectations and getting something productive out of it comes from that. It can be really motivating too. If a lot of athletes will be in, who knows, their 11th year of training, and you feel like you're kind of on Groundhog Day with like, okay, it's the same thing again. Here we go. And sometimes adding in a race like that can be really fun and motivating and re-spark your joy that you have for riding bikes and for training and for the whole process that you're going to go through. So I never think that there is a too early to race in the season. It just has to be right for you. So ask yourself if it's what you need and if it's what you want to do, and what the outcome will be in terms of, will this help me out as an athlete or will this hinder me as an athlete? Whatever that is,
vein, I think
you can find it.
There's ways to find that motivation too. It can be outside of racing, but like you're saying, if you feel like it's the same thing day after day and you're lacking motivation, there can be fun, different ways to like create your own challenges, right? Like, I really wanted to do this 6-hour route, it doesn't fit into my training, but it's like, I'm going to plug that in there and I know it's going to motivate me, kind of thing. Like
Alex
recently,
can do 6-hour routes and not blow up his training. For the rest of us, we may not be that way. I want to throw that out there. Sorry, Alex, go ahead.
No, yeah. I mean, it's scalable to anything, right? Like it could be that 2-hour route, or it could be that climb that you wanted to do, but you never had enough time, or whatever it is. I think finding those and plugging them into your training in the off season is important. And I think that's part of the discussion we had around testing. Like that day is fun for me because it's not the norm, it's not like, oh, go do 2x20 and then do some endurance and then do a sweet spot. It's like, just go send it. It's like, all right, let's go. Like there's an excitement to changing it up. And I think we all as athletes get how important laying the groundwork is, and we're willing to do the work, but it's always fun to throw in those challenges or different things for training. Like I've been doing 6-hour rides. It's been new for me, but it's like, I've been finding a fun challenge each time. Like one time I was like, okay, I want to climb 10,000 feet of climbing. So I made a route that does that. Or, I want to try to see if I can do 100 miles. So I made a route for that. And the challenge for me is fun because it brings me somewhere new that I haven't trained before, but also there's something else to look at besides like the time. It's like, oh, like how close am I to 100 miles? And my robotic brain makes it very easy because I was 5.6 miles in, which means I'm 5.6% done. So makes my math nice and easy.
Alex, I kind of want to talk about your plan for peaking. I don't know. You also don't feel like you have to reveal this if you're like, keeping this close to the vest, because you are going to have racing. Don't
keep much close to the vest, John.
Yeah. You'll have racing throughout the whole year because of the Lifetime Grand Prix. Is there a specific race you're targeting for that?
Not really. My plan, I'll come in to see Otter Strong. It's an hour away from me. So, I mean, that one's always good for me. Get to sleep at home. It doesn't really disrupt anything, which is nice that it's the first one because it actually pushes out the date, which I actually travel anywhere. I'm still on the fence about Unbound.
Sorry, can we talk about Sea Otter really quick? It's 100K now, the mountain bike race.
Yeah.
Are they going to do 2 laps, or do you think that they will string together? I've heard
it's 2 big laps with about 10,000 feet of climbing.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's basically kind of like the course they had before, but twice.
Yeah, I think slightly different, but a lot of the same footprint, just because I think they use a lot of the best trails out there. So it'll be a good course. It'll, not crazy technical, but it'll be like fun, flowy single track. Like Fort Ord is the trails around there, and it'll be super fun.
That's your turf too. That'll be cool.
No.
Amber's thinking of all that. Amber's you can't see this on YouTube. Amber's smiling and Ivy looks like she just smelled something disgusting when we both said Fort Ord. So Amber must have good memories racing the Sea Otter Road races there, and Ivy must have terrible memories racing there.
So bad.
Yeah.
I'm great at a lot of things, and XC isn't one of them, and that's okay.
that race is totally different than most XC races too. So
I almost made a joke about doing half of that amount of climbing on like a race car track, and you're like, where am I? What's happening?
It's a little wild. So I interrupted you, Alex. I apologize, but so that's Sea Otter for you. Is there and everybody seems to be throwing out Unbound as the one that they aren't focusing on.
I'm on the fence. For me, it was just from a perspective of how wrecked would 11-hour day make me for the rest of the season, just because, excuse me, it's my first year doing like proper volume. So like, someone like a Keegan who's been doing it for a while, like he can probably factor that in and know how he'll respond to an 11-hour day. For me, it's a bit of an unknown, and the lifetime rules say that the points are 5 out of 6. So you only have to start 5 out of them, and you have to start the last race, which is Big Sugar, obviously, because it's the ultimate event. But so I'm on the fence about Unbound. So I don't really know how we're going to factor that in. It's kind of just see how we feel in a couple months with the volume. And if we feel like that would be a good idea, we'll probably throw in some of these challenges where I'll do a big day. We've considered doing an Everest, not for any attempt, but just for like that length of time on the bike with some intensity to kind of see how that feels and how the body reacts. But just throw in I like climbing, so fun challenges. Of course. And then Tusher, I think, will be a good course for me. Jen and I are doing Tahoe for a month again, so I'll be acclimatized for that. And it's a lot of climbing. So excited for that one. And then after Tahoe, I will go to Colorado, and we will see if I do XC Nationals, because I think it's at Winter Park again.
Yeah.
And then I'll do the Leadville stage race, and then Leadville. And then that'll be kind of the end of my altitude block. And then after that, is it Schwamigan? Is that how you say it?
Yeah. Who knows? Your guess is as good as mine, Alex. I have no clue. Yeah.
and that one is, I think, the shortest of all the events. It's 40 miles, I think.
Yeah.
And so roll into that one and then cap it off in October. So it's kind of easy I wouldn't know if I'd call it a peak, but at the beginning of the year, Sea Otter is kind of on its own in April. And then if I skip Unbound, the next one isn't till July. So it's kind of, there's a lot of time to kind of come down, so to speak, and build back up for July. But then as soon as I hit Tusher, it's every month through October. So it's July, August, September, October, all have an A race. So at that point, it will probably not so much be a peak as like a high level of fitness that we carry over multiple months, with kind of like tricking the body into peaking. So with high volume, we'll probably do volume between the races and then drop the volume the week before to kind of artificially make the body be like, oh, sweet.
Give yourself some freshness.
Yeah. And then get some freshness for the race and kind of see where we're at.
Cool.
My goal is top 5 in the series. So I think that's achievable and like a challenging goal, but also I wouldn't be surprised if I achieved a top 5 at the same time.
Sure. Yeah. You mentioned Tahoe and you mentioned block, doing an elevation block, all that stuff. Ivy, I know that you are looking at, once again, doing the short commute down to Sacramento for a training block as well. But I want to talk a little bit about training blocks or training camps, so to speak. These like focused blocks of training that you will do to inject some more force into the training, or inject something specific that you're going for this. Ivy, how do you use these camps? Is it purely just to escape cold Montana, or are like, what are you hoping to accomplish with a training camp or a training block when you put it on your calendar like this?
I was thinking about this a lot because I was trying to figure out why winter here wasn't doing it for me this year. I usually get excited about skiing and I have an okay time riding the trainer, and this year I'm just not. And it's made me have to reconcile with why I like training and riding my bike. And the answer is I like being outside and training outside, and I like to do it with my friends. So sure, there are, of course, advantages to getting outside and being warm, but for me, it's really like the reason why I want to train and ride and race now.
You've raced professionally for years. You've done all that. It's now it gets to be what you want it to be, right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So specific objectives, because athletes ask about this, how to fit a camp into my training plan that I have. And I want to go over the basics of how you do it with TrainerRoad and what you want to do. So firstly, you want to be clear with what you want from it. If you need like a mental break from the grind and you need to go to someplace warm and you live someplace cold, that's one thing. And that's absolutely that's just as valid as anything else. If you want to accomplish something specific with fitness, that's another thing. For most people that are time constrained, it's really common to get a high aerobic, like a high volume aerobic camp where you're going to be riding at lower intensities, but just accumulating more volume because of work or because of life constraints. You're just simply not able to achieve a whole lot of volume. And that can go a long way if you do a week where you increase your TSS. And we've talked about this before, but if you're increasing your TSS by like 100% and above, which for a lot of people, that's just going to be the necessary thing, you're absolutely going to have to plan for after this block of training, giving yourself time to be able to recover from that. Otherwise, you will do that hard block. And then after that, your training will be subpar. You'll just be too fatigued. Remember, it's all relative to the tide that you're carrying right now in terms of the training stress. So, but be specific with what you want out of the camp. So if you really want to work on whether it's high intensity stuff, whether it's something with bike handling and technique, whether it's riding with a group, whether it's falling back in love with the sport, whatever it might be, or aerobic fitness, just be specific and then try to use that as a theme. If it's time with friends, use that as a theme to be able to plan routes that everybody is going to enjoy and have some fun with. But the main thing, because we get plenty of questions on this, usually around this time of year, whether it's a team camp or anything else, is you have to be conscious of the impact it will have on your training thereafter. It will take time. And we have a great blog post on this about super compensation. It's wonderful. And we'll link down below in the comments. And I'm sure Jesse will probably throw it in right now into the live chat if you're joining us, but we'll throw it into the description for you. But the whole concept of this is that you dose your body with more stress than it's used to, and then you give it time to be able to recover and absorb and adapt to that training. And then thereafter, you can expect a elevated tide. Now, this isn't something that you can just do all the time. That would be really difficult for your body. You do this in a more measured way. Typically, when you're training, you gradually bring it up and then drop it down and let yourself recover, gradually bring it up rather than something so severe. But that's what you'll want to do with this. We'll try to keep just that advice to really basics and really kind of high level and simple, but make sure it's getting what you need out of it. Sometimes team camps can be really draining and stressful. So if you do have a team camp or a club camp, make sure that also you give yourself time off after that. But give yourself the time to be able to recover and then get back into it. That's like my number one rule. Amber, would you have anything else to add on the camps?
Well, if you're doing a team camp and you're going to be doing a lot of social interaction in addition to the training, whether or not you're an introvert, that's a lot of cognitive load and that's a lot of stress to your central nervous system. So you do actually need to eat a little bit more to help compensate for that. It is a big energetic load that a lot of people overlook and don't think about. So make sure that you're taking time to give your nervous system a little bit of a reset. That might mean carving out a little extra time for sleep, or maybe a little more alone time, going for a quick walk, whatever it is that you need to reset. But make sure that you're taking into account that extra energy expenditure because it's a lot and it adds up, especially when you're trying to pack in a lot of volume for training too.
For sure. Okay, let's touch on recovering from training with illness once again. And we're kind of just, with all the questions that we've gotten this week, I've picked the 3 topics that were most commonly represented by all of this. The recovering from illness one. Once again, we're not going to tell you how to come back from COVID. Also, there are not reliable studies that show that like athletes that get COVID take this long to recover. And the impacts are this on their respiratory system, this on their circulatory system, and this on their musculature. Like there isn't anything like that. And it's honestly just, I think it's just too early to be able to know all of this. We don't know much about this. It's evolving constantly. So as a result, to be able to carry out tests, we'll be able to get really exact things in terms of how COVID affects fitness. I think where the science is focused on other things like saving lives with it. So, so I don't want to belittle concerns about fitness because training matters to all of us. And when we get, if you are sick in any way, then of course you want to know how to come back from it. So instead, I think it's probably best to talk about principles, right? Basic principles that we follow when we are sick. Amber, can you kick us off in terms of what you would suggest to athletes coming back from being sick thereafter? Are there any sort of rules of thumb that you follow, or forgive me, I should say just guidelines that you tend to follow when you're coming back from training?
Well, a mindset thing right off the bat is to understand that even though you may have missed training, this isn't really time off. This has not been recovery. Your body has been working really, really hard to fight off an infection of some kind. And that takes a ton of energy. And that alone is an effort that's worthy of some recovery in and of itself. So just because you might feel completely recovered from whatever illness it was, doesn't necessarily mean that you are fresh and rested and ready to jump into really hard training. So think of it as a different stress. It's a different type of stress than training, but just because you haven't been on the bike or you haven't been training doesn't mean that this was time off and rest, because it definitely wasn't. So you need to give your body a little bit of extra time to make sure that you're recovering from that. So that looks like maybe taking more time off the bike, a couple more days. When you start to feel good, it doesn't hurt to take an extra day just to be sure. And then when you do get back to training, less is more, really come back gradually. Don't pick up where you left off is probably a really good place to start. You want to work back up to that. So, and how quickly you can work back up to that is really, really individual. So that's a place where you have to be very aware and in tune with what's going on with your body and be very, very honest with yourself about how you're feeling. Just because you want to catch up and get back to where you were really quickly doesn't mean that you should. And you need to be very clear and honest with how you are actually feeling and not just ignore some signs that maybe you need to back it off again. I see Ivy nodding, so I kind of want to hear what she's thinking.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, being honest with yourself is my guiding principle too. Excuse me. And being okay with what that looks like has been so tough for me, especially with things like COVID. And, I feel like we've all experienced this with like collarbone breaks, for example. Everyone has a different opinion about what that recovery process looks like.
You can race the next day, Ivy.
Yeah, for real. Yeah. And I feel like having been so sick a few weeks ago, I was being bombarded with information and opinions about, and when I have broken collarbones multiple times or bones or whatever, I feel like whether there's information and experiences surrounding that illness or injury or not, everyone's input and truth and experience invalidates whatever you're going through. And that's been so hard for me to not feel like myself, and have for like a couple weeks had tried to incorporate stuff in slowly and just not feel good and have to have check-ins all the time with myself about what I could do, and to feel like I couldn't, and then have other people tell me, well, you should be doing this and it shouldn't be a problem to do this. And well, my experience when I was sick recently was that it felt okay to do this, and to just feel totally invalidated that it didn't feel okay for me to do that stuff, and that maybe I am being soft or something is wrong with me, or I'm dying. I don't know. So being honest with myself and being okay with the answer that I gave myself was my guiding principle, and is for injury, illness, all that.
That's a great nuanced principle and good guidance to be able to follow with that. Well, one thing I want to cover, and I've already seen this through into the live chat. I was like almost had a bet to see how long it would take for somebody to mention it. The whole like above the neck train, below the neck don't. Oof. And I can't
wear warmers if it's under 70 degrees.
Yeah, I disagree with that. And I just want to make sure that we don't like maybe us on the podcast. I know that it's a very small portion of this world altogether, but maybe we can help others, just support them in whatever approach they need to take from coming back from illness, because boy, who knows if it's something above the neck like that with those sort of rules or anything else, or if it's just a cough, or it's just a sore throat, or it's just a headache. Well, hey, like people need to take the time they need to. So support them in that. one thing that I think is really interesting to talk about is with adaptive training and how this works. And in the future, constant improvement, we would love to be able to get information from the athlete in terms of whether it's subjective information they provide, whether it's biometric feedback from different sensors that they wear, everything else, and then make those adjustments. Nate's mentioned that before on the podcast. We want to do that. But for now, a great thing that I would recommend that you do is you can still go in and pick an alternate for whatever workout you have scheduled when you come back, or you can just do a lower intensity workout instead. And when you do that, make sure you fill out that survey honestly. If you come back from illness and that short recovery ride felt really hard, make sure you mention that, because that's going to be a signal to adaptive training that like, oh, hey, okay, let's not try to progress this athlete as we were. Let's try to progress this athlete as they need. And once again, it trains you as an individual. So that's a big thing that you can use. And the same goes for training camps thereafter. I use Amber, one of Amber's team's great features was building out annotations and time off. You can actually plan time off. If you click on the calendar and have an annotation, if you have like one of these training blocks that you put onto your calendar and you're going to do that, afterward, you can plan a week off, and that's wonderful. You can still train if you want to that week. You can throw in easy workouts, make sure you keep it nice and easy. But that's one thing that you can do. If you have the luxury with your training, you can go about adding in time off thereafter, sickness or something like that, and that can help as well. But once again, those surveys are so important. Just be honest with them. And a lot of people ask on the surveys, how do I answer the survey? Don't overthink it. We're all overthinkers, except for Alex. Alex has never overthought anything in his life, of course.
Just update my firmware and I'm good to go.
Yeah. But we're all overthinkers. Don't overthink it. All it's asking is how it felt. And that's truly all you need to answer. How did it feel? And then based off how it felt, it will get the right data. So that'll really help when you're coming back from it. When you're coming back from illness, one thing I would really recommend is that you double down on the other things that support your training and wellness. So doubling down on nutrition. So from the hydration perspective, make sure you're getting plenty of electrolytes and plenty of fluid. From the nutrition side, make sure you're giving your body plenty of carbohydrates. Fighting an illness and recovering from an illness is hard, and it takes a lot of resources. So your body needs as much good fuel as possible. And the better quality fuel, the better your body will feel. So that's higher quality foods. Ivy.
Oh, and mental wellness.
And exactly.
It can be so honestly depressive to have such a significant part of your life and your happiness taken away when you have to rest for an extended period of time. And just jumping back into training is not possible for many people. So taking extra care during that injury or illness time and setting up appointments with a counselor or therapist, or journaling, or finding other activities that you can do that feel okay, that bring you some joy. All that stuff is really important.
Yeah. For a lot of people, training is a little bit of an escape, right? And that's part of how we kind of maintain a really healthy mental outlook. And when that's gone, like Ivy said, that can be really hard. So sometimes finding another way of protecting that time for yourself and doing something else. I know a lot of athletes have really found art and creative endeavors to be surprisingly helpful when they can't train, because it's still carving out that time. Because it's so easy, like, oh, I'm not training, so I have this extra hour in the day, and then just automatically devoting that to something other than that protected time for yourself that you usually have. It's hard to protect that time, but it is really important. And like Ivy said, reaching out for help is a really, really great way to start. And putting that time to similar use, even if it's not in the same way.
Anybody else clean their already cleaned bikes during this time?
Yeah. Yes.
I haven't gotten that firmware update.
One other thing that I would recommend is if you have a race close on your calendar, and if you can, and now there's one thing where if you lose that race, you'll lose all motivation, and that could be bad for your mental health as well, because you lose that thing that brings you to it. But boy, can races be damaging to our mental health when we have it and we get sick before, and we're like, I have to be fit, I have to be fast, I have to be back to normal for this race. And if you're trying to rush the whole process because of that, life will go on without the race, and you can find another one. So that's one thing I would recommend. And I've learned that lesson the hard way, is that if I am sick or I have anything like that, I mean, that's why this year I have a few races in the spring and that's it on my calendar. I'm not planning anything after we have a kid, right? Because I know my life is going to be crazy thereafter. So I don't want to have those races be a competing priority in any way. And a race right after you're sick is a competing priority. Now, if it's your job, it's one thing, right? Amber, Ivy, and Alex, that's different. But when the rest of us, no, I shouldn't say the rest of us, but a lot of us listening to this, it isn't our job. And as a result, we don't need to put that sort of pressure on ourselves to heal quickly. We just need to heal at the rate that we need to heal when we come back from it. So, okay, let's get into some rapid fire questions. And then we're going to get into some more listener questions. Krista says, what are the host's favorite recovery mixes? And then an additional one, anybody have vegan or dairy-free options they'd recommend? So what about in general? And then we can go to the vegan or dairy-free options. Ivy, you're smiling. Do you have any that you recommend?
Yeah, because my favorite recovery drink is also vegan and dairy-free. It's beer.
There we go. We go. Chad has done deep dives on this. If you have questions about alcohol and training, just look up Ask a Cycling Coach alcohol and you'll find lots of information. It's a personal passion of Chad's. So he's able to, as you know, with Beers with Chad.
Backed by science. Yeah.
He's been able to research it and get to the bottom of his personal passions, the intersection. Alex, how about you? What do you do for recovery?
I keep it pretty simple. I use like the Gatorade powder, like the just big endurance mix, and then Bob's Whey protein. That is, the whey protein is not dairy free or vegan, but they do, I think, a pea protein and a hemp protein. I'm no expert on protein profiles, so I don't know if those are complete air quotes or if they serve the same purpose, but I do like their products. I also like Bob's in general, just because they're family owned and all that. And I like both of these options because you can find them in a grocery store. So when traveling, you're not looking for like some specialty brand. So easy to replace and easy to mix.
Nice. Amber, you threw the horns and Alex said that one. So you do the same?
Same. Yeah. The Gatorade powder and plain whey protein powder from Bob's Red Mill. Exactly. Tara's Whey is another good one too, but again, not vegan or that one is definitely dairy. So
yeah, whey has to be dairy, right?
It is. Yep. Yeah. I struggle with dairy recovery mixes big time. Like they do the opposite. They do not help me recover. They make my life measurably worse. So instead, I've tried a bunch of different vegan protein options. When it's just pea protein, I don't find that I get much real benefit from it, but it's really hard to actually measure if a recovery drink mix actually makes an improvement other than if you feel good or not. Right. So boy, that's really tricky. And I have no clue if it's actually the recovery mix or not. So big grain of salt, a whole giant salt lick, keep it handy. For me, the one that I've liked is Momentous. They have an essential plant-based protein. It's a mix of rice and pea proteins. They say that it's more of like a complete profile. That one, I've felt like how good I feel or used to feel with just a normal recovery mix thereafter. So you know what the worst part is? That Cliff chocolate is the greatest recovery mix I think I've ever had. It's basically like a thick, delicious chocolate milkshake. And I can probably have it for one day and be okay. But then if I keep going with it, my stomach gets destroyed. So that one day though was the worst part because it makes me question, maybe it wasn't the recovery mix. Maybe I can do it and I have it and it's so delicious. And I go the second day and then I'm just in a world of hurt. So, but the Momentous stuff is still good. The one that I usually get is just like a vanilla flavor. And then I mix it in with like oat milk or something like that. And then it's getting close to a 4-to-1. Who knows when I do that? It's probably better it may not be perfect, but it's still good. So that's what I would recommend.
That's probably worth mentioning. I do the plain whey protein and then choose the Gatorade powder flavor I like. If you do vanilla with it, I think it tastes weird, but you could probably get like an orange creamsicle style thing going if you got orange Gatorade and a vanilla whey protein. So
it sounds good. Fiona says,
I just do blue.
Yeah. Fiona says,
Gatorade doesn't have flavors.
What about podcasting makes the host most nervous? I can't believe you do this live for 2 hours every week. There's something
when I
raised
make eye
eyebrows.
contact with myself and I realize like my resting face is very unfriendly. I just look like I'm super like annoyed at whatever someone's talking about when I'm just listening.
How about you, Amber? What makes you the most nervous?
This question is making me nervous.
That's a fair answer. Yeah. Ivy, same.
I think the first podcast that I did, and you asked me about my experience as a cyclist, I think I blacked out. And I just said, I was like, yeah, race bike, go fast. I like lost my, it was so scary. But I'm less nervous about the live aspect of it now and more nervous about the aftermath of the episode or preparing for it, coping with my imposter syndrome, making myself believe that for every person that doesn't like me and doesn't want to hear what I have to say, that I do help someone. That's like
someone. It's like a ratio of like an infinity to the one person that comments below. Just so we're clear, it's not 1-to-1.
No,
it's not 1-to-1 at all.
And someone doesn't like it.
And I know that, and making myself believe that is hard work, and I get nervous that I'm all the time that I'm not actually doing anything worthwhile here. And even though I know it's not true, it's hard.
Yeah,
it's really hard. Like
we put ourselves out here, man.
Yeah, you could get, 10 really nice comments and then maybe one snarky or mean one, and it's the snarky mean one that is going to stick with you. So thanks to everybody who gives us the positive feedback, because it really does help a lot, and it's hard to outweigh the negatives. So we really do appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. Whenever you leave a review on anything, not just this podcast, anything, ask yourself, do I have some sort of issue that I have right now that I'm mirroring onto another person? And chances are, if it's being done in anger, it probably is. There's probably something else. So yeah, it is tough for sure.
Constructive criticism is one thing, but sometimes it can get mean-spirited, and that's a little bit tough. And I will say, one guideline is I'd never go back and listen to myself, because there are two types of people in this world: people who can't stand the sound of their own voice, and Morgan Freeman.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah,
I have never listened to a podcast episode I've been on. I'm with you, Amber.
Yeah,
Morgan Freeman probably can't stand it too. I listen every week, and I take notes, and it's tough, but maybe I've become desensitized to it.
Well, you wouldn't listen to the podcast otherwise, John. I can skip the ones I'm in, at least.
Yeah, I think that it's look, like there are many things I'm concerned about, Fiona, like tech issues. I'm constantly thinking about the different perspectives that everybody has and how we can best serve them, and people in the live chat and their questions, and my hosts and their perspectives, what they have to offer. There's lots of stuff. So I can't answer that, Fiona. I'm a ball of nerves, but it somehow ends up working out every week.
That's so true, though. Like, you're in the middle of saying something, and then in the back of your mind, you're like, the person who has this perspective is going to totally take it like I'm just, and then you're like, maybe I shouldn't finish this sentence. And you're just like, I'm just trying to help, but then I'm going to tell somebody that their way is wrong.
Yeah, that's how it goes. Well, hey, we keep doing it because we want to help everybody get faster. So Jeff has
to go fast. Zoom.
There's a reason I have to wear black shirts every time I do a podcast. It's not because I'm goth. Well, a little, but because I am absolutely peed out every time I do podcasts. It's so scary.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Don't raise the arms.
Camera's like here.
Yeah.
All right, Jeff has silly questions.
Commas cucumber.
Yeah. It depends on the day. If it's real hot in here. Yeah. Anyways, Jeff, Shimano or SRAM? SRAM for me.
SRAM.
Mono.
Aero or climbing bike?
Climbing bike.
I'd go Aero.
Climbing bike.
I'll go Aero. Gravel bike or hardtail?
Gravel bike.
Hardtail.
Hardtail. I'd go hardtail.
Hardtail for sure. Speed play or SPDSL?
SPDSL.
SPDSL.
Oh, speed play. Oh, goodness. I'm alone in my principles. Saddle cutout, yay or nay?
Yay.
All caps, yay.
Yes.
Yeah. How do people ride physique saddles? I don't understand. Whenever I sit on them, I'm like, I feel like I'm sitting on a 2x4. I don't get it.
They do have some with channels now. So
that's true. They do have those. Yes. Forgive me, physique. I apologize. Not trying to, bars rolled forward or parallel with stem. I assume he's talking about like drop bars.
Parallel.
We're talking about the drops.
Yeah. If a bike fitter was like, your bike fit is wrong and you're going to get injured, so we're going to have to roll your bars forward, I'd be like, bring on the injury, man. I can't handle it. It looks so bad when the bars are rolled forward. I do not like that look. Or rolled up. Just keep them. Must be in line with the stem. And that's ridiculous. I'm sorry for everybody. That's just my own flawed personal belief. Okay,
I
Michaela.
don't know where these videos come from, but I've been seeing the ones where they like tilt their head. I feel like we need that on the live, where it's like the two options are here, and you like you can like hit it with moving your
TikTok.
head.
You're talking about a TikTok trend.
TikTok. Yeah.
It came on
I don't know
Instagram.
anything about that.
Find Ivy on TikTok.
Shows how much I know about TikTok.
I'm more of like a ceiling cat when it comes to TikTok. I'm just like observing. I don't actually make content. Cat. Yeah,
I just wait for the good ones to trickle into Instagram, and then I watch those.
I can't with you. Stop.
We've talked about this before. Reels are just past due or expired TikToks. That's all they are. Yeah.
I can't wait 6 months from now for Bing Bong to make it to Instagram Reels.
Sam Bennett is actually really good at stuff like that. He was like, his most recent one, he was getting like dropped on the team time trial training, and it was like Star Wars, and it was overlaid of like, how you doing back there, R2D2? He's like,
It's fantastic. And for those that don't know who he is, he's works at Specialized, national crit champion, multi-time, really good athlete, great guy. Okay, Michaela, I broke my chain during last night's workout and had to call my boyfriend to come pick me up. And she says in parentheses, oh, the shame. What should I carry with me to fix a broken chain? One of Ivy's quick packs is what I carry all my stuff in. But sorry, Ivy, I know you don't want orders.
No, that's okay.
I carry on a mountain bike. I Specialized has a top cap tool that you can use as a chain breaker. It's super easy, and I love that.
Who makes that?
But Specialized. Sorry.
Ding.
Yep. But then there's also, honestly, all of them are like any chain breaker that you can have on a multi-tool. Just don't get a multi-tool without a chain breaker. That's kind of my rule. Unless you have one stashed in your top cap. Always have one there. I was
guilty of this forever. I carried a quick link and not a chain tool. And I thought about it. I was like, I can't really use this without the other.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Your teeth won't work.
Yeah. I'm a bad athlete. I don't carry chain stuff. I've
just have it all in the team car.
Now that I said that, yeah.
Need a new bike.
Just need my right hand. Put it in the air.
Get out of here, pros.
I feel totally bad that those more scarcely occurring mechanical issues I'm totally unprepared for.
That's what the phone is for.
Yeah. There's no shame in calling your boyfriend.
There is no shame. Yeah, there is no shame. I will ask this. Okay. Or I will say this. For carrying a quick link, I would recommend taping them together because they're very easy to lose, and just taping them around a cable really quickly, just a tiny little thing. You won't even see them. They'll like blend in. They're kind of the size of like a hydraulic brake line cable. That's a really handy thing. You'll make sure that you never forget it. And that's great. That's if you can get a quick link. I think those are more rare than like a King's rings these days. But if you can find one, go for that. And then just tape it to like one of the cables, and then make sure that your multi-tool has a chain breaker. That's a pain.
Be real, Jonathan. You just call your Tesla and you have all your spares in the back. Just have it on autopilot.
Summon. Yeah, that would be pretty sweet. Okay. Another one. If you could go back and ask a pro rider a question about a weird or interesting racing moment they had, who and what would it be? I would go back and ask Nino Schurter why he kept running those tubular tires that flatted seriously, I think every single race for like 4 years. And the bad problem was he was fast enough to get away with it. So he was fast enough to get a flat and relax while his mechanic would change the wheel. And then it'd be like a fun game. It seemed like for him to just chase back and demolish the whole field coming back, which is just crazy. But He kept running those tires for like 4 years, and you just knew every race, well, he's going to flat. So when he flats, this will happen. Why'd you do that, man? Why didn't you change? That's what I want to know.
So
anybody else have one?
I heard a story about a pretty legendary cyclist who we didn't quite overlap. She was a little before my time, Petra Rosner. And I heard this kind of story / legend about her, and I would love to hear her tell it in her own words. But essentially, she was a sprinter and she was doing a stage race in France. And the stage that she was completing was the day before a big sprint stage. And being a sprinter, she was going for the win on the sprint stage. So the day before, she wanted to use as little energy as possible. So she calculated the time cut, which is the minimum amount of time you have to finish the race in order not to be cut from the race. She calculated what the time cut was, decided that she had enough time. So she pulled into a cafe that was on the race course, sat in the chair in front, sipping an espresso, watching the race go by, and then casually looked at her watch when she knew that she needed to get back on the bike in order to make time cut, rolled across the line, and then won the sprint stage the following day.
Like, that's a boss move.
That's so boss. I'd love to pick her brain.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Ivy or Alex, do you have any of these?
Hard to think. I guess the most recent one is I'd be curious to sit down with Nino and Flukiger about the last corner at Worlds.
Yeah, I still don't know why Matthias Flukiger was upset about that. I don't get it.
I agree with that, but I'd be curious. I don't know. I couldn't think of anything else, so it'd be fun to just kind of be a fly on the wall in that conversation.
I've had my wheel chopped off almost literally in crits for a preem. Like it was like a chain lube preem. That's world championships, man. He didn't even make contact with you. Like he just took your line. I don't see how that, like, maybe Matthias Flukiger, I don't know, maybe he hasn't raced many crits when you're like racing with a dad and he really wants a pizza preem for his kids or something. Yeah, that's true. He was racing. Yeah, good point. Yeah. We used to have water park ticket preems here at our local crit series, and dads would get crazy on that lap. Like it was like, I want to take my family to the water park and I will do 10,000 watts to beat you. I will do whatever it takes.
It was not about the water park. It was about how to make cycling relevant enough that they can buy a new bike.
Maybe. Yeah. But yeah, it was pretty wild. If you heard water park preem, it was like single guys dropped back and dads just went to the front, and it got wild.
It's like throwing the bouquet.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. Okay, let's go through a handful of other questions that we have here from Jake. He says, I played American football growing up and through college. After graduating, I've picked up cycling as a new way to compete. I have a pure sprinter power profile, but I've been able to get my FTP to a smidge over 4 watts per kilogram. Well done, Jake. That's awesome.
Yeah.
He says, however, on long weekend base rides where my power is in zone 2, I'm averaging 80 to 85% of my heart rate max. He mentions upper zone 3, lower zone 4. I'm assuming this is because I have less of the muscle capillarity and mitochondrial density than most others who have a 330 FTP. That assumption is likely partially true, if not very much true, right? In the sense that more training brings about more mitochondrial density. We're able to process more sugar, turn it into energy quicker. We're able to operate more efficiently as well. So that is probably something at hand here. He says, I'm nervous to start a TrainerRoad plan that focuses heavily on sweet spot or threshold intervals if I have such a lacking aerobic base, whereas my anaerobic background would do the majority of the work at these intensities. Is this a worthwhile worry, is what he asks. And he says, I'm more interested in long-term development than short-term FTP boosts. So thanks, you guys. Love the podcast. Love TrainerRoad. 5 stars. This is perfect for you, Ivy, because you were a collegiate volleyball player, which is absolutely fast twitch. It's basically like American football, where it's like, go sprint, crazy lunging moves. So what would you have to say in this case to Jake?
That they're probably wrong about their power profile being a pure sprinter power profile. I think that they're just a beginner. It's totally normal in early stages in your cycling career for even a couple years to feel like you're still building up that base and endurance zone to where it feels like a true endurance zone and doesn't feel uncomfortable. And that's something that I think people from traditional sport backgrounds have a hard time with. we're used to immediate feedback with like gym strength or like a new drill or learning a new set or working with a new setter or a new teammate or something. We're used to that immediate feedback of it takes a few weeks or half a season or something or shorter sometimes to master or see immediate improvement in a skill. And cycling is so much not like that. So it's easy for someone who's really strong to think that they're a pure sprinter. And, even a lot of people can produce an insane amount of watts or power for a sprint in one isolated instance. That doesn't necessarily mean
some
that
can't.
You should. Some can't. Yeah. Well, yeah, the same thing goes for like a climber. When you're first starting riding, thinking you're a climber and kind of putting yourself in that box, Jake might not be a pure sprinter. They might end up being a really good all-arounder, stage racer, and it just is going to take time. And those are systems that you can absolutely improve upon, expand upon. Like Leah Kirchman is a Canadian road cyclist who has won many sprinting national championships and really focused on it, and won a TT national championship as well in really competitive field. So just because you're a sprinter or have sprinting power, especially earlier in your career, doesn't mean that you can't develop those other systems or that you are going to end up to be just a pure sprinter.
Two common assumptions that I see with new cyclists, small new cyclists assume they are climbers. Mm-hmm. People that are not small new cyclists assume they are assume they are sprinters. And it's totally unnecessary to put yourself in a box like that. Aerobic training takes a long time, just like anaerobic training too, but aerobic training is difficult because it's hard to see the benefits, just like Ivy said. Is really well put, Ivy. So yeah, just keep at it. I want to dispel one myth with saying that the plans, being very sweet spot or threshold heavy. First of all, in this case, Jake, if you're doing sweet spot work, that's one of the most optimal spots to be working on aerobic conditioning, which is what you really need, right? So it's actually fantastic that you would have that. But also the plans are not sweet spot and threshold heavy necessarily. We have polarized plans. The build plans are not sweet spot or threshold heavy. Depending if you're doing the 40 KTT plan, it will be, right? But if you're doing the short power build, it won't. So all the plans are different and built for different reasons. So don't have any hesitations in that regard. The plan will be appropriate for whatever your goals are. And also don't fear anaerobic training in that, like, you think that it will come at the cost of your aerobic conditioning that you've been working on. It won't. It's just going to make you a better endurance athlete. And even if you do have a facility for anaerobic work and you've built up a lot of, whether it's lean mass and fast twitch fibers, like all this stuff that you're assuming, even if that's the case, it still doesn't mean that doing anaerobic work is bad. So it just makes you a more complete athlete across the board.
I also want to dispel the myth that your anaerobic's going to take over for sweet spot and threshold. It is pretty much impossible for you to do that anaerobically.
Yeah.
So you may have an anaerobic contribution, and we talked about it in testing protocols. Sometimes they'd have you do a 5-minute effort first to remove that piece, but it's still going to be primarily aerobic.
Yep, and that will get removed throughout your intervals anyway, right? The reason
that they exhausted is like, if you're doing a sweet spot effort, it's impossible at the end to be doing it anaerobically, unless you're just a monster, and then maybe you are a sprinter, a 45-minute sprinter.
It's one of the biggest like head explode moments for people is even when you talk about repeated anaerobic efforts, and when you tell them and when you look at that, they become increasingly aerobic as the repeats continue, because anaerobic stores they're just there for a short time and for a good time, and then they're gone. And that's it.
After that, a long time,
exactly. After that, aerobic stores are like, oh gosh, okay, I guess I'll do my best to help you through this. And that's why it starts to feel really difficult. So like Alex said, it's never like it's so, and we've said this so many times, it's not a system of switches, it's faders, right? And your body's going to work at it. But just consistency. We talk about this. If it's 3 workouts a week that you have scheduled, make your goal to hit those, obviously not at the expense of your well-being or health or anything else, but make it your goal to be able to hit those 3 workouts and do that for 9 months. And what you'll see after that 9 months, or, do it for a year, something like that. What you'll see after that is a huge improvement, even with something where it's just like 3 workouts and I just don't miss with that. That's the sort of consistency that really makes you faster. So, Julia's question. She says, sort of quick question. She says, sort of quick question for Ivy and Amber. Favorite saddle for females and things to look for. This is my first time training year round and training indoors, and the saddle on my gravel bike wasn't very forgiving to be on 3-4 days a week. So I got the same saddle that I love on my mountain bike, thinking it would be the same, and it's not. All that being said, I know body position and being rooted on the saddle in the right way is crucial. And I do feel as if I'm in the right position. Sit bones are rooted in the saddle, not resting at all my weight in the arms. Basically, all the stuff Chad says in the workout text. She says, I'm essentially shaped like a tall, muscular 14-year-old boy, with the exception of the obvious anatomical differences down there. So I almost never use women's specific equipment. But now I'm thinking it's time to make an exception, and I'm looking for any advice on where to start, as most of the good local shops here are at least an hour drive away. And I don't even know if that's something you can test. So any and all advice would be welcome. Thank you for having such a binge-worthy podcast. All the best, from Julia. Thanks for reaching out, Julia. And you can also submit your questions. Please do that. Go to trainerroad.com/podcast. And this is where Alex and I step back. Ivy and Amber, what would you say in this case, to Julia?
Amber, you go first.
I was going to tell you to go first.
Because I missed in the initial part that they said they have a mountain bike saddle that they like. And that actually makes sense to me when thinking about women's specific saddles, because I feel as though a lot of women's specific saddles are wrongly made with more support on the sit bones, kind of supporting recreational riders that are in a very upright position. And, just kind of like, oh, women, big sit bones, more big back, better. And that's
man makes sense. Man smart.
Really, no. So it makes sense why a saddle like that would be okay in a mountain bike position when you're more upright. And it totally makes sense that wouldn't work for you on your gravel bike when you're in a more aggressive position. And so that is why my advice for trying saddles, and trying saddles is hard. There aren't a lot of places that do like rental saddles or test saddles. And so the number of saddles that I have bought and sold, I feel like there should be a special network for just easy buying and trading and rotating of saddles, because I know so many people that do this. But you really just have to try a lot of saddles, try things that you're right that there should be special saddle accommodations for women, in that we need more support in the pubic bone area, so not necessarily 100%. The back of the seat bone. So what I look for is a saddle that is a little bit wider and has a cutout in the center of the saddle, not on like the tip or anything, or in the back, in the center, kind of like near the center of the rails. And a lot of saddles like that are TT saddles that are made for people to be kind of like in a rotated forward position, that I feel like supports our pubic bones better. And, you just got to try it out. And my advice would be to try it out for an extended period of time, like more than just a couple rides, and experiment with the angle specifically and position back and forth. But you need to give yourself like a solid number of rides to see if it really works before you decide that it isn't working, especially if you're going into it kind of uncomfortable. Like every saddle feels uncomfortable when you're already in pain. So it's going to take time. Try stuff out.
Yeah, I agree with you, Ivy. And that was one of my biggest pet peeves, was hearing bike fitters talk all the time about like, oh, it's all about the sits bones. I'm like, that is never where it hurts. Like never.
Like they could make chamois without pads that like as far back as they don't need it.
Exactly. So I'm totally with you there. And I think one way of thinking about it is if your sits bones and your pubic bone form a triangle, usually on a road bike in a more aggressive position, you're sitting on the sides of that triangle or your pubic bone. That's where you're going to be experiencing the most pressure. When you're talking about being on a road bike or a gravel bike in that aggressive position, the thing that you need to be worried about the thing to consider about sits bones is that they're not rocking. So some saddles in cross section have a very sloped kind of cross section, so that your sits bones could actually slide down either side. And then that can create, if you're not already really stable in your hips, that can allow you to rock your hips a little bit too much. But all you need is a platform that's stable enough to hold your hips still and to keep them from rocking. It doesn't have to be a ton of padding, or it, the comfort isn't all about the sits bones. And I think that can get conflated, especially like Ivy said, when it's being applied in different scenarios where it doesn't necessarily apply. So I am a big fan of the cutout myself. Not everybody is though. And so just because a saddle says it's women specific doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work for all women. And we've talked about this before. A lot of men love women specific saddles because it's really less about, it's about your individual anatomy. It's really less about men's or women's. It's just a lot of saddles now have channels too. So I would start looking for channels or cutouts, like Ivy said, and call around, because you might find the saddle demo programs are becoming more and more common. I know Fabric has a demo program. So if a bike shop carries Fabric, they usually have a demo set, and you can maybe take home a couple of different saddles if the bike shop is far away from you. Try each of them out for a week and see how it feels. If it's a good bike shop, know that most cyclists deal with this. And so it's not uncommon to have these problems, and it's not something that you have to feel self-conscious about. So one thing that can help is, if you're comfortable talking with the folks at your bike shop, take notes on exactly what is causing problems for you. Is it chafing? Is it pressure? Those types of descriptors can help them guide you to a potentially better saddle, so that when you are testing saddles, at least you're kind of starting 2 steps ahead instead of just completely starting from scratch. But other than that, I second everything that Ivy just said.
Only thing I'd have to add to this is, when you test a saddle, make sure that you're giving yourself like test it with higher intensity work, lower intensity work, if you're able to, if you have that luxury. Test it on a longer ride or a short ride, because that's also something like if somebody is a crit racer, for example, and they get a saddle and they just tried it out by easily pedaling along on a trainer, it's probably going to be a really different experience once you get into a crit on that saddle. So that's one thing, is context is really important. Cool. Okay. I'm going to stop them there. There's only one live question that I want to cover, because we're already over our 2-hour time, but I want to just cover this one, because we got it actually from 2 people. We even had people asking this last week. So Rudo from the live chat, he said, I'm a 54-year-old rider. I always trained on heart rate, but recently bought a power meter, and I noticed that training on power goals leads to a very high beat per minute. Is my FTP setting too high? So, I mean, very possibly your FTP could be too high, but here's the tricky thing. I don't know what zone you're talking about, so I'm going to make some assumptions here, Rudo. As you become more aerobically fit, you're likely to see a lower heart rate within reason, not, and maybe it's just a more consistent heart rate rather than a lower heart rate for a given power. That's likely what you're supposed to see. Now, if it's hotter than it was, then it's going to be higher. If you're more dehydrated than it was, it's probably going to be higher. If you're more stressed than you were, it's probably going to be higher. If you're focusing on power data and it's freaking you out that the number's going all over the place, unlike heart rate that feels more static, that's also probably going to raise your heart rate. So there's so many different things that can affect it. So while heart rate can be a bit of a validation, you really got to take grains of salt handy and smooth out that data quite a lot. That's my first bit of advice, is don't necessarily look to validate training with power by training with heart rate, because they operate very differently. So that's the number one thing. That said, and if you're new to the sport, you'll definitely see this. That said, if you are feeling like, and probably an easier way to put this into check is use RPE, or even use the basic ventilatory thresholds. Basically, you can carry on a conversation normally. You have to speak between breaths. That's when you hit your first ventilatory threshold. And that likely is going to coincide with somewhere around your upper zone 2, or somewhere around there. And then once you get to the point where you are having to talking is very hard, you're likely close to your threshold, second ventilatory threshold. So you can use those to validate it. But the one thing that I would say is, Rudo, if you use TrainerRoad in particular, then you're going to have calibrated training and you don't have to worry about it. If your ramp test or your 20-minute test or your hour-long test or however else you've decided to test and figure out your FTP, if that is too high or too low, it will get adjusted with adaptive training, and then you'll be in the right spot. You don't have to worry about it. So this very concern is why we built that. But caution if you're using heart rate to validate power. It's always tricky. So, okay, that's it. Thanks everybody for joining this week. Please review and share this podcast with your friends. That would be fantastic. It's a great way to help this podcast grow. We appreciate you all so much listening. It's such an honor. And remember, submit those questions at trainerroad.com/podcast and go sign up for TrainerRoad. Have your best season yet. Adaptive training, new exciting features that Amber's team, David's team, Dom's team, all of our wonderful product team, and all of our engineers are working on, and designers, all Hans team, everybody. So go sign up. We've got a lot of exciting things coming down the pipe, and we can't wait to give them to you.
Oh, and feedback, right? How do you want your podcast listeners to submit feedback?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes. Go to trainerroad.com/podcast. And there's a survey where you can do that. Thanks, Ivy, for doing my job very well.
Carrying the team. I'm doing your job, sending Nate to Ivy jail. I got it.
That's it. TrainerRoad.com/podcast and fill out that survey. Give us feedback. Let us know what you like about the podcast, what you want to see more of from the podcast. And we'll talk to you.